Hey, hello. Welcome to the free week of MCAT prep with Kaplan. Did you hear me? I said free week. Can I get a shout out for free week? This is like my favorite thing. Like, there's nothing better than free. There's nothing better for MCAT than Kaplan. And here we are, melding the two things together. Welcome. How are you? Give me a hi or hello, a funny anecdote from your day. Let me know that you can hear me and that you're ready to get started with the free week of MCAT prep. My name is Coach Allie, and I am so excited to see you. I am a Kaplan Plus coach here at Kaplan, and what that means is that I am a big fan of study planning. I do a lot of study planning, a lot of test taking strategy, and I spend a lot of time making sure that you reach your MCAT goals in your time frame. So not just that we get there, but that we get there in a time frame that works for us. You're so welcome, Katie. Hi, Afif. Hi, Giselle. Hey, Linus. Hi, Allie. I love that name, Allie. That's fabulous. Yes, name buddies, twinning. Hi. Hello, Vivian. Hi. Hey, Bobby. Hey, Byron. Hi, Sarah. Hey, I can't keep up with all of them. Hi, Anaga. Hey. Hey. Yeah, we're doing free stuff today. I'm so excited to see you. I have a poll up right now. I want you to go ahead and take a look at that poll. I think we closed the other ones, but we should have just the one poll up right now. It says enter your email to receive. So I will be sending out handouts and strategy tips on all of the things that we discussed this week. And I'll also be sending out homework, or I guess what you could call preview work for the next night's lesson, so that you can kind of get an idea of what we will be working on in the next night of the free week. So make sure that you have entered your email, because otherwise you won't be getting the homework assignments and you will not be getting the handouts that correspond with the lesson. And that would be a shame, because that's part of the free week too. In addition, you will also then have access to me and my teaching team, so that you can submit any questions throughout the week as well. So it's not quite as good as private tutoring, but you can get coaching from us for free from Kaplan all week via the email. So I want to make sure that you have entered your email and that you do enter that, because I'm going to close that poll once the lesson begins. And we'll open it again at the end, but just make sure that you get it in as soon as possible. And I'm so shocked to hear that you guys are all eating granola. Is it, you know what? It's probably because you all want to be doctors. I would say I'm like the chips. I'm like the chips person. I will eat chips whenever I can eat chips, and especially when I'm stressed out, and studying can sometimes stress me out. It's a lot of work. And so I would be eating chips. But congrats on the granola, y'all. And awesome work on Grey's Anatomy. Listen, I've seen every episode. I can't stop. I can't quit you, Grey's Anatomy. I can't quit you. So I feel like, hey, we understand each other right here. Grey's Anatomy for the win. I see that most of us are applying for 2018. You know what? We're getting it done. I assuming that most of us, that means that we're going to be doing it this summer, maybe May or June.
Hello everyone, we've lost Allie, but we're working on getting her back. My name is Ashwarya. I am one of your off-camera teachers, currently on camera though, but I'm happy to be chatting with you guys. So I am currently a second-year medical student at Yale, and here comes Allie, back for the win. Welcome back, Allie.
Thank you, Ashwarya. We have a policy here. It's called never go dark. So, you know, you never are without a teacher. Sorry about that. I'm not sure exactly what just happened to me. Just everything just froze up. Technology issues. You know what I like to say? I like to say, Coach Allie, really good at tests, really bad at technology. So sorry about that. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. And I hope you forgive me, because, listen, not everyone is good at technology. And as doctors and aspiring doctors, we have to learn to accept people as they are and help them to get better in the ways that they can become better. And technology is not one of those ways for me. Hey! Yes, congratulations to Teacher Ashwarya. She's been attending Yale Medical, and she'll be able to give you a lot of great advice about, being in medical school and being a top tier medical school and getting into medical school and all those great things. Yeah, right, Dan. It's my kidney. It's my kidney. I'm having stones. I gotta go. We'll have to ask Teacher Kristen all about kidney stones. Let's get started talking about today's lesson. So we're going to start with a welcome and introduction. We did it. I hope you feel welcome. You certainly are welcome here in our classrooms. We're so happy to have you. I can't tell you how much we love Free Week here. Like the Free Week of MCAT is my favorite thing every MCAT cycle. It's the opportunity to reach out to the most students. It's a big part of our outreach program along with our scholarship program. And it's just like one of my very favorite things to do. And I'm so stoked. I'm sure you can tell like everything I think goes right across my face. Can't miss it. Again, my name is Allie. I am a Kaplan Plus coach. That means that my biggest goal is study planning and test-taking strategy with a little bit of tutoring on the side. So if the quickest way to get you to your goals means that I tutor you a little bit, I do that too. So happy to have you. And if you feel like you need coaching, well, guess what? You'll get it free all week via email. It is one-on-one, private, like almost like a tutoring relationship when you enroll as a Kaplan Plus student. But for this week, you'll get it via email. We'll start with an overview of the MCAT because I always have people that are brand new. I know a lot of us are not new. We are here preparing for tests that are coming up either this Friday or early this summer or later this summer. So we should have been preparing for a little while, I think. But I always have people that are brand new. Shout out if you're one of my newbies. You're brand new to MCAT prep. You're just getting started. You don't know a lot about the test yet. You're looking to learn more. I always love to see my newbies too, because listen, if you're brand new to MCAT and you've already found your way to Kaplan, then you are doing it right. You've obviously done your research. We are the world leader in MCAT prep. We're very, very proud of that and have been since forever, as far as I know. So we're very excited to see you. Hey, Noobs. Hi, Noobs. See, didn't I tell you always? Hey, Lise. Hi, Marlene, Giselle. And hi. Hello again. Hi. Me, myself, and Kathy. Hey, Kathy. Always have newbies. So I like to start with an overview. So if you already know this stuff about the MCAT, just be patient. Don't worry. We're going to get into talking about the icky kidney. No, I'm just kidding. Kidney's great. It's, it's whatever. Anyway, we'll get into talking about it. It'll be fun. But first, we're going to start with an overview because we have to be able to put this lesson into context. And especially for students who don't know a lot about the MCAT yet, that can be a little overwhelming. So we're going to start with a little bit of an overview. I totally feel you, Carol. I did too until this test. This is the most important test of our educational career so far when it's time to go to medical school or professional school, grad school, and that is the time when sometimes it does get a little hairy because if you can't prep on your own and it's not moving as fast as you need, sometimes you do need a little help. So I actually came to Kaplan as a Kaplan student because I tried to prep on my own for a little while and I was not really getting very much results, just a little bit, not as much as I needed. So, but to each their own and welcome. And, we have this whole free week. So you're going to learn so much this week and you're going to get so much. And listen, if you guys put your email in the poll and you use it liberally, we are going to get to know each other really well this week because a lot of emails are going to be going back and forth. After the overview, we're going to have a session from our MCAT channel. MCAT channel is unique to Kaplan. It is how we can say with 100% accuracy that we offer the most live instruction of any MCAT prep course, which we're also really proud of. So what we do here is we customize schedules for students based on their strengths and areas of opportunity. So everyone will take a diagnostic test and take practice tests along the way. Patricia, this is the agenda. We're gonna get there, I promise. Just bear with me. And so what we have is we have different lessons that are at beginner or intermediate or advanced across all of the topics of the MCAT and then all of the subtopics too. And that is what we call our MCAT channel. And so the lesson that we're doing today on the kidney is one of those lessons. So if you're wondering kind of where this lesson comes from and how it fits into the curriculum, it's an elective lesson. So you may find that the lesson is a little advanced for where you're at right now. I want you to look at it then as a preview for what you'll be studying. And you can always take the lesson again later and just review it again once you get a little bit more study in. Or if you're already getting your study in, use this as an opportunity to gauge your content knowledge, to ask questions on the topic because you have private tutors that are going to work with you. Any question that you ask will be directed to your private tutors, so you'll be able to work with them all throughout class, and also to the teacher on screen, which is going to be Teacher Kristen, and she is amazing. And that's true. That's 100% true. Then we'll do plus coaching. So we're going to do a live group plus coaching session with me every day this week on various topics. You guys can tell me, I'll let you vote, but these are the topics that I'm thinking of this week. And you can tell me, I try to pick the top topics that are helpful to my private coaching students. So we're going to do study planning, how to build the most successful study plan using any kind of resources, how to build your MCAT study calendar. So if you're trying to figure out how to fit it all in with all the other things you're doing, how to increase your content retention. So how to use what we know about the brain and learning science to increase content retention in your MCAT prep. Data tracking, figuring out why you're missing questions and assessing how to fix those particular needs. Because it's not always, I don't know content. Sometimes it's like they tricked me with this little trap, or sometimes it's like I was rushing. Sometimes it's like, oh, I've only been studying biochemistry for the last 2 months and I haven't touched my biology in those 2 months. And so that's why, so we try and track data. So teaching you how to do that on your own. Also the do's and don'ts for prep, for MCAT prep to make sure that you are able to finish in your time frame, and using CBT tools for points. Because listen, if you are not using the tools of the MCAT, highlighting, striking, marking, reviewing, moving around, then you are leaving points on the table. There have been all kinds of studies on graduate level entrance exams that have shown that the more you use those computer tools, the higher your points are. So we want to make sure that you know how to use it, when it's appropriate to use it, what there is to use, and we'll show you kind of where all that stuff is. And then we'll, email it out afterwards as well so that you can have that. So those are our plus coaching topics for the week. So I hope that you will enjoy that, because plus coaching is, I'm quite literally, it's my life. It's my life's work. Let's get started with what you will see on the MCAT. So everybody knows the MCAT is about 7 hours. Go ahead and take a screenshot so you can see the number of questions that you will have and how much time you will be in it. This test is grueling. Has anybody taken a full-length practice test yet? Or even a real test before, to where you know what it feels like? Yes, and don't cram the new week up. I love it, Erica, for real. And if some of you veteran preppers have advice as well, please share it, because this is a team environment and we want to all learn this stuff together. So you'll see that they're pretty much testing everything about the same amount. Cars, just a few less questions, but that doesn't mean that cars is any less of a beast. Do not take that section lightly. It's a pretty difficult section, just like they all are. But it's also an opportunity to differentiate yourself and show that you are one of those students that really, really took that section seriously, and that you have skills there that maybe not everybody shows up as strongly on. So it could be a real opportunity to set yourself apart. Yes. Okay. You've taken 10, Melissa. That's so many. I think that's maybe more than you need to. I will tell you, as a plus coach, I'm not a huge fan of taking a lot of practice tests. I like to do like at least 6. I think at least 6 is good. But what I really am a big fan of is targeting individual question types, so that like you increase your skill on a certain content level with question after question after question after on that content at that level. And then we increase the difficulty. We do that too. And then we do it across several different content types and difficulty levels, and then we take a practice test. Only because if you're learning something from your book or in class or whatever you're studying, or your tutor or wherever you're getting your instruction from, and then you have to wait until you see it on a practice test, it could be a while. Or when you see it, maybe you only see it tested at the highest level, so you haven't had a chance to build up those skills that you're learning and reading about. Or it may be that you don't see it for a while, or you don't see it at all again for several tests, and then you don't have the opportunity. So by the time you see it, it's like, I can only a little bit remember what I was learning. So I like to like drill stuff in and then do practice tests. But yeah, those full-length practice tests are grueling. So but you do need to do it, because you have to build your endurance, and you have to always check how your progress is going. That is hugely important. So here is this scoring of the MCAT. So you will see the average score is expected for each of the sections, as well as the total average score. What is right now the average admit score for MCAT, or for medical school? Right now it says that 500 is supposed to be our average score, but that is not our average admit score for medical school. Show off your knowledge. MCAT experts have been studying a little bit longer. What is that score range for the average for admitted students? A little bit higher, a little bit higher. Euro, you got it. I like to call it a 510. So it's the range between 509 and 511. And so the average admitted student score is going to be like about a 510. You could call it 510 or 5.9 to 5.11. So it's a little bit high, a little bit lower if you're going for a DO program. From there, 506 to 508 would be safer for a DO program. But if you're going for MD, then I would call it a 510. So it's the range 509 to 511. So that's what you should be shooting for. However, it's not that for every single school. Is anybody shooting for a school where their average admit is significantly higher than a 510? Because those schools are out there too. Or even lower, right? There's lower too. So some schools have a lower. Yes, but teacher Ashwari is absolutely right. 510, 511 is a good goal score. It's going to get you so many options. But there are certainly schools that will accept lower and do on an ongoing basis. And there are a good many of your high-ranking schools, super high-ranking schools, your top-tier schools are going to want a little bit higher for you. Yeah, your husband looking at it. Deidre's like, it's not even about the schools. This is a pride thing. I'm going for 520. You do it, Deidre. You better tell them how Kaplan helps you along the way. 521 for Samantha. Yeah, I mean, some of these schools like really want super high scores. One of the things that we'll show this week is a comparison of not only your MCAT, but your MCAT by GPA for average admit. So you'll be able to see the admit percentages based on not only just your MCAT, but on your GPA as well. Because sometimes people, you might have heard this, sometimes people say 40% of students get accepted. And I've heard students take that two ways. Either, oh my gosh, it's only 40%, or hey, it's 40%. It's kind of like a coin flip. So there's kind of, those are kind of the two competing responses I hear to that. But it's not 40% for everyone everywhere. So it really is affected by the GPA. The MCAT is hugely important. It's your biggest and most important piece of your application packet, certainly, but it is affected by your GPA. So seeing how those two things work together and what percentage of students are admitted can be really helpful. So we'll be looking at that this week as well. Go ahead and take a screenshot here. This is just showing how much each of your subtopics are tested inside of the major sections of the MCAT. Do you guys think that it's really crazy how many colors you see in each section? I really do, because I feel like it's very easy to think, oh, that's the biochem section, and that's the chemistry, and that is, psych. But it's so much more. They test a little bit of everything in all the section. MCAT loves to put a little MCAT in your MCAT, They're like, I heard you like MCAT. They're like a whole meme. They're memeing themselves is what's happening. So take a screenshot, but just note that many of your questions will touch on multiple subjects and subject areas. So it's not as cut and dry as your undergrad textbooks may be. So if you pick up an undergrad biochem textbook, you'll get reminded very easily of biochem content, a lot of which will not be tested on the MCAT, and most of which will not be tested that way on the MCAT, because the MCAT loves to mix question types together. They love to mix sciences together. So that's something to be preparing for and watching out for. All right, MCAT skills. MCAT skills is really important to me because you need to know that it's more than just content. Has anybody realized that yet? Any of my veteran studiers that you're like, or even newbies who have taken practice tests where you're like pretty darn good at science and you know that you know science, but then for some reason you're not getting that MCAT score that you were expecting to get? I feel like that's a rude awakening for a lot of us. It happened to most of us probably, but it's a good thing to happen in a way, because if you can realize that early, the earliest that you learn that it's not just about your science, the better. Good, I'm so glad you're seeing it. I'm so glad you're seeing it. Yeah, it can't carry you through, Giselle. It's just not going to. And that's why you have some people that were in your classes who were kicking butt and taking names and don't make it into medical school because it's not a science test. What do they have in their back pocket, those schools, from you that you give them that proves to them that you know science? How are you going to show them I know science and I'm pretty darn good at it? Because they don't need the MCAT for that. They got other things. What are you sending over to them? They're never going to need your MCAT to know that you know science because they have your GPA. They have the classes that you took, and they have a pretty long list of prereqs that they require. But they have a pretty long list of prereqs that ensure that the students who enter their school have the requisite science knowledge that they need. So they have that. So I think that alone is proof that this test is something more. It's looking for something different. I call it the difference. There's no joke. I like to call it the difference between WebMD and being a doctor. Are you guys familiar with this website, WebMD? Yes, of course. WebMD. Oh, be still my heart, WebMD. It's actually, you know what? I still go every now and then. So I guess I can't get a transcript. Yes, I can't really get too down on WebMD, but WebMD, for all that it has, all of the knowledge in the world, it's computer-based. It holds so much more than I can ever know in my one human brain. It can hold and store on their servers, whatever. But Chris is right. So I am currently pregnant. I'm going to have a baby. What is WebMD going to tell me if I put in my symptoms of pregnancy? Because probably pregnancy will be on the list as like a potential, like, well, maybe. It's cancer. You're dying. You're done, fam. It's over. Because of WebMD, right? And so this test is really looking for that other thing because they know that you know science and there are, ways that you can cram knowledge in and you can do research and you can know all these things, but there is something different about doctors, this ability to diagnose, this ability to take what seems like disparate information and put it together in a way that just having information is not going to see. It's like, you guys have seen the show House, I'm sure, right? So how he can see these like random weird things and to be like, oh, it's probably da-da-da-da, so that's kind of what they're looking for. So the way that they're doing that on the MCAT is certainly that you're going to need content information. You do need to know your basic sciences. But we like to say here that it's a mile wide, but only an inch deep. So you only need to know a little bit about everything, pretty much, but a little bit about a lot of things, certainly. But these are all first semester concepts for the most part. A couple classes maybe go into second semester material and those sciences, depending on the program that you're in. But you don't have to be a house, right? You don't have to be an oncologist. What you have to do is be able to take the kind of basic science information that you do know and now apply it and also see how disparate pieces of information that they provide to you, you don't have to know it, they provide to you, can be applied with the basic science to answer the question. So it really is about more than content. It's about reasoning, how you think, problem solving. It's about analysis and putting all of that together with your content. And then you have MCAT science skills. And that is my thing. I love it. That's my jam. So if you, while you're practicing, look at each question as an opportunity to figure out, okay, what else are they looking for just besides the content here? What else could have helped me? What clue did they provide me? What pattern was included, right? What pieces of information? Because sometimes do you guys ever get mad at the questions? And you're like, there's so many words in this question. Like, why can't they just ask this more simply? Well, they can't ask it more simply because then it would just be a science test and they're not doing that. But those words, even though as much as they can be kind of overwhelming sometimes and they are meant to confuse you at times, not confuse you, but to see if you get easily overwhelmed, there are so many nuggets of hints and clues and helps that they provide in these blurbs and in these questions and in the answer choices that you can use to diagnose, right? So that's what the ER doctor, it's like the family is yelling about this happened and this happened and this happened and then I saw this and then I saw that, and it's like, can you scoop it all up and take it and figure out what's wrong with that patient? So look at it that way, holistically. What else are they expecting me to see? What else were they testing here? And how can I use that ability to help me? Yeah, it's really, 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 really very helpful. I can feel you on that. I can feel you on that, Euro. But especially in Psych Soc, I think the answer choices are super helpful. But answer choices are always one of your biggest helps across the test. All right, we're going to be doing a full lesson today. It's going to be a full MCAT channel lesson. Then we're going to come back again. We're going to talk about study planning. And then we're going to answer your questions. Make sure that your email is in my poll. We're going to shut down the poll for the lesson, for the kidney lesson, but we'll bring it back up afterwards for study planning. And that was it. I told you it was going to be really short. So I look forward to seeing you later for building out your MCAT study plan. But for right now, it's time to pass you off to your teacher. I don't have to have a teacher because I'm done. I did it. Just kidding. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. We've all been through the fire, and you will come out the other side. Your teacher today is Kristen Russell. She's amazing. I'm going to pass you out to her now. I'll see you later for study planning, and I look forward to working with you as your coach via email all week long. Kristen, go ahead and take it away. They're a great group. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. I am super excited to work with all of you guys. How do you feel about our topic for today? This topic is one that I feel like is tested so much on the MCAT and is not one that everyone loves, the kidney. What do you guys think? Feeling pretty good? Feeling not so good? Deidre is in love. Emily is excited. Okay, I love the kidney I'm seeing. That is excellent. I know that a lot of people may not feel that way as well, and that's all right. Some of you are saying like 10 out of 10. Some of you maybe 1 out of 10 or less. We are going to do review for those of you that feel awesome about it, and for those of you that aren't feeling so great, we're hopefully going to increase your knowledge. Now, as Ali was mentioning, these channel sessions do generally assume that our students are coming in having some background knowledge. So I'm going to try and really hit the basics here, but if any of this is over your head and you haven't really studied or reviewed the kidney yet, don't beat yourself up. We do have students that oftentimes will come watch channel sessions multiple times. They will have read in advance. So I'm going to try and tailor it to this group, but if you're doing great, that's awesome. If you're not, then this is just an area of opportunity. I don't like to think about things as real weaknesses. Every time you find something that you're not very good at, that just means if you focus in that area, you can increase your score. So it's going to be great. If you don't feel good about the kidney, then after today, your score is going to go up. So let's take a look at our topics for today's lesson. We are going to describe the major functions of the kidney. So this is really going to be, what does the kidney do? And then really we know the nephron is the part of the kidney that we mostly care about. So we're going to be talking about the physiology of the nephron as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. So when you guys think kidney, what comes to mind? What do you think of as the function of the kidney? There are multiple functions, so tell me what you guys can think of. Might start simple. Okay, so we have the nephron's passing filtrate. Why do we pass the filtrate? We're going to produce urine, right? So we should be thinking excretion. We're excreting things. We're using the kidney to do that, right? And we're going to talk a lot more about that. But excretion of soluble waste products. Okay, so urination is a term we use. Does anyone know the more medical official term that you will likely use in medical school? What's another term for urination? Let's see if you guys know it. We're going to get rid of lots of things in there. What is the term? Micturition. Absolutely. Micturition is the medical term for urination. You could say someone micturates. So how much does a person on average micturate a day? How much urine are you going to release in a day? What do you think? Very good. You guys are all about in the range. It's about 1.5 liters per day. Some people a little less, some people a little more. Certainly depends on how much fluid they are drinking. Okay, so of that urine, how much of it is water? How much of urine is water? It's quite a substantial amount, maybe even more than you might think. 90 to 95% of urine is made up of water. Now, of the soluble part of the urine, 50% of the soluble part of urine is urea. So mostly water, but of the stuff that's not water, lots and lots of urea. Because that's one of the things we don't want to be reabsorbed. We want that to stay in the filtrate and be released into the urine. So that's a big part of it. All right, so that's all excretion, and we're going to talk lots and lots and lots about excretion. It's the thing that we will spend most of today on. What else does the kidney do for us, though? What are the other functions of the kidney? So maybe just to jog your memory, let's think ADH and aldosterone. What do those two hormones do for us? What do those do? Okay, so maintaining of our plasma osmolarity, maintaining our blood volume and pressure, and also regulating pH. Absolutely. That's another huge, huge part of what the kidney does for us. Now, we're not going to talk a ton about the hormones of the kidney today, but briefly, let's just talk about the differences between the two. So we have ADH. ADH is antidiuretic hormone. What's another term for ADH? What's another term you might see on the test for ADH, antidiuretic hormone? Starts with a V. I bet some of you guys know it. It is vasopressin. So vasopressin, testosterone is our secondary. So ADH, antidiuretic hormone, vasopressin, all exactly the same thing. Okay, so what does ADH do? You may have been previously confused between ADH and aldosterone because they, in the end, do something fairly similar in that they both are going to increase reabsorption of water. But let's talk about how ADH and aldosterone are different just briefly. So ADH is a peptide hormone. It is going to be triggered by a high plasma osmolarity. So when you're thinking about how many solutes are in your blood, if you have really high level of solute in your blood, you essentially want to think, okay, well, I want to dilute that. I could dilute that by increasing my reabsorption of water. And as you guys are mentioning here, we want to increase reabsorption of water by opening our aquaporins. So that is then going to reduce my plasma osmolarity back down. Now, aldosterone, on the other hand, is going to react to something a little bit different. It is a steroid hormone, so it is going to take a little longer to kick in here. What is it going to be triggered by? What is aldosterone triggered by? Knowing what causes its release will help you remember how it functions. Yeah, low blood pressure. Nice, George. So if you have low blood pressure, you should think, okay, well, low blood pressure also means I have a low blood volume, so I want to increase my blood volume. Well, how would I do that? How am I going to encourage water to move into the blood? How could I encourage that? Well, we might remember that water follows salt. So what I want to do, like Yossi's saying, is increase my ions. If I increase the activity of the sodium-potassium pump, we are going to see that water will then follow. So like I said, the thing they have in common is that they're both going to increase water reabsorption, but they do it in two different ways. ADH is going to directly increase water reabsorption, which of course then is going to dilute the osmolarity. For aldosterone, we're seeing that both our ions and water are moving in, which increases our blood volume, but does not change osmolarity. So you can see that these two things together are going to respond to different things. Now, ADH will respond to low blood volume in extreme cases. So if you have learned before that ADH also responds to that, if you were shot in the stomach and you were hemorrhaging blood, then you would also see ADH responding. But small changes in blood volume, aldosterone is going to be the main hormone that is engaging. So that's a lot to say in that the kidney regulates blood volume and osmolarity. So we actually have 2 channel sessions dedicated to the kidney. If you were an MCAT student with Kaplan, you would have the opportunity to attend both of them. Today, we are mainly going to be talking physiology. Our other session deals with more of the activity of those hormones and some additional practice questions. So you guys could definitely look forward to those in the future, but I wanted to make sure to share with you guys just the basics on those hormones so you have that information. Now, when we're talking about osmolarity, and this is going to be something that is important as we move forward in today's session, is the idea of an osmol. Well, an osmol is just a mole of solute particles. So when we're talking about later on our different types of pressure, it's important to understand that we have osmolarity that is based on the solute in our plasma, which is what we're going to be talking about. Now, the osmolarity that we should be looking for in different places in our plasma and our interstitial fluid is 300 milliosmoles per liter. So that is a value that you want to be familiar with, just like you'll want to be familiar with about the average production of urine per day. So a couple numbers here that come into play. So these are 2 of our functions of the kidney. What else can you guys come up with? There are a couple more. What else? So we talked about activity of hormones that are going to regulate volume and osmolarity, but there are certain hormones that we're going to secrete as well. What hormones are we going to see that the kidney secretes? There's one of these hormones that is important for red blood cells. Nice. Annika says erythropoietin. Absolutely, it's going to stimulate red blood cell production. Awesome. There's another one that we're going to see lead to an increase in calcium in the blood. Calcitriol. Very nice. If some of you guys knew that one, if it was on the tip of your tongue, I'm sure that it's something you're familiar with. So, of course, when we look at the kidney, there is an interaction with how much calcium we have. So calcium regulation is an important pathway to be familiar with as well. Deidre, it's okay if you haven't heard of it. Now you have. This is something that is going to increase calcium, and it can do it 3 ways. How can we see an increase in calcium? See if you guys can come up with it. How can we increase calcium in the blood? So we have a lot of calcium in our bones. So if we wanted to have more calcium in our blood, we could break down bone, right? That's going to give us more calcium. Okay, what about when we eat? We want to be able to absorb as much calcium as possible through our GI system. So that's going to be part of it. Okay, what about reabsorption at the kidney? That's another place we could increase calcium in the blood. So those 3 mechanisms all can increase blood calcium. All right, we have one more function of our kidney, and this is one of those terms that often gets confused. But the term I'm thinking of deals with synthesis of glucose from amino acids. What is that process called? What is that process called? Synthesizing glucose from amino acids? What is that process called? And I'll also talk about the phrases that often get confused with this, but you guys got it. Very nice. Gluconeogenesis. Now, like I said, these terms can often get confused, but I think biology is one of the best sciences when it comes to nomenclature because we can really break down words to help us understand what's going on. Okay, so when we see the word genesis, we should be thinking creation, to make something. Okay, when we see something start with gluc or gluco, we should think glucose. Well, then we have neo, which means new. So we have the new creation of glucose. Now, how else could we see glucose being made? What's another process we might have? Instead of making glucose from amino acids, how else could we make glucose? All right, I like it. Glycogenolysis, absolutely. So when we think about the term again, we are breaking down glycogen. Okay, well, what if we wanted to make glycogen? What if we wanted to make glycogen? What's the term for that? Glycogenesis, absolutely. So again, when we see genesis, we're thinking creation. So glycogenesis would be the creation of glycogen. Glycogenolysis, we see lysis at the end, which is breakdown. So we know that we can use glucose to make glycogen, and we can break down glycogen and get glucose. So those terms sometimes get confused, but again, if you just look at the roots, just remember what these do. So these are the main functions of the kidney. Like I said, we're going to talk a lot more about excretion of soluble waste products today as we move through and talk about the physiology of the nephron. So let's take a look for a moment at extracellular versus intracellular fluid. Because when we're talking about reabsorption and secretion, it's important to understand how this process works, where things are actually moving. So what is the extracellular fluid? What does that consist of? The extracellular fluid. Well, if we think about the word again, it seems like that would mean the fluid outside of the cell, right? Totally makes sense. So Deidre mentions interstitial space. This is part of it, but what else? What else would be considered extracellular? The blood plasma, absolutely. Now, this seems obvious when we think extracellular means outside the cell, but it is important to remember that both the plasma and the interstitial fluid are part of extracellular fluid. So intracellular fluid then is a lot easier. It's just the fluid inside of the cell. Now, of course, we are going to have membranes separating each of these things. So if we start to kind of fill in what we're looking at on this diagram, we see intracellular fluid here at the bottom. So we're assuming the cell's at the bottom. We then have a cell membrane that's going to separate extracellular from intracellular fluid. We will then have a capillary membrane that is separating our plasma from our interstitial fluid. Now, this table over here on the right, this is a table that you do need to know all of this information. But the point of me talking about it isn't to go through a table that you can clearly memorize. It's to help us understand really what we're looking at. Okay, so we know the activity of the sodium-potassium pump. According to the sodium-potassium pump, which way is sodium moving and which way is potassium moving? If we know that, then we can really anticipate and predict where we would see a high extracellular or intracellular fluid level of both sodium and potassium. So when you're thinking about charts like this, it's very easy to get into the mode of, I need to memorize, I need to memorize, I need to memorize. But if you understand why these things are true, then you don't have to memorize them. So we know that we're going to see 3 sodium moving out and 2 potassium moving in. That is the activity of the sodium-potassium pump. So it's not surprising then to see high extracellular fluid levels of sodium and high intracellular fluid levels of potassium. Okay, so let's think about albumin. Where would we find albumin? Where would we find that? Albumin is one of those proteins that we'd expect to find in the blood. Absolutely. So this is one of the only times that we're going to see albumin be high in the plasma only. So you can see in these other examples here in our table, we see that something is either high or low in the extracellular fluid. But albumin is one of the unique ones, and that albumin is found in the blood, but we shouldn't find it in the interstitial fluid. So it's high in plasma only. And that makes sense if we think about where we would expect albumin to be. Now, if we get a buildup of fluid in the interstitium, how are we going to get rid of that and eventually get it back into the blood? What's the process that we would do that? How could we essentially move that fluid back to where it needs to be? We have a whole system that helps us with this. And Sarah, you got it. That is the purpose of the lymphatic system. It's going to help us return this fluid back to where it should be so that we don't have pooling and edema, swelling or fluid buildup in the interstitium. That fluid gets back to the bloodstream where it should belong. So this again helps us kind of understand the motion of solute, understand the motion of fluid. So when we're talking about reabsorption versus secretion, we can understand how things would have to move. So if we are moving from the nephron to the bloodstream, we have to go through the interstitial fluid to do that. So through a cell membrane and through a capillary membrane. Kind of understanding that motion of things really kind of helps predict what might happen in certain instances, because the MCAT loves to test you on application. So really fully understanding that instead of just memorizing what reabsorption means is going to help you immensely when you get to passages and questions on the MCAT. So now let's take a look at a practice question. I'm going to pause briefly, let you guys read this question and pull in. Go ahead. Once you think you've got it, pull in for us. Okay, so albumin is the major blood osmoregulatory protein. We talked about where we would find that. The most likely effect of a sharp rise in the level of serum albumin is. Okay, so we're trying to think about why something would occur, and this is what I said, that application is key. So if we're thinking rise in serum albumin, what might cause that? What should we be thinking at this point? Tell me in our chat. What should we be thinking? We have an increase in our albumin. What should we associate that with? Mentioned earlier that water really likes solute. Albumin counts as a solute. So if we see an increase in one of those solutes, we would expect for fluid to follow, right? Okay, so where is fluid going to come from? Where is water going to come from? Where could water follow from? Well, we know that the interstitial fluid is the same extracellular fluid as the plasma. So we're going to see fluid from the interstitium move into the plasma. So answer choice D, which about 2/3 of you got, is absolutely correct. We would expect that with this sharp rise of solute in the blood, we would want water to move in. The body loves homeostasis, it likes to balance things out. So the interstitium is a source of fluid for that plasma. So great job to the 2/3 of you guys who got that right. Solid work. So this is kind of our function of the kidney, a quick application. And now we're going to dive into, I think, maybe your favorite part of the kidney. It's definitely my favorite. We're going to talk about the nephron next. So let's talk physiology of the nephron. There is a lot going on here, so I know this can be an overwhelming topic, but we're going to try and simplify it as much as possible and break it down, understand the whys instead of trying to simply memorize. So here we see a fairly complex picture. Don't stress too much about this picture just yet. Let's talk really just about kind of the 4 primary things going on in our nephron. So you guys started telling me about these earlier when we were talking functions of the kidney. Some of you guys mentioned filtration. So the 4 that we're going to be looking at are filtration, secretion, reabsorption, and excretion. Those are the 4 things the nephron's going to do. So let's walk through those. What is filtration? What does that mean? We're filtering. What does that mean? I dig the glomerulus too, Carol. And Joanna, you got it. We're filtering the blood, right? So we're going to filter the blood at the glomerular capillaries, and it's going to move into what part of the nephron? See how much you guys remember. Yeah, and you got it. The whole point here is that we're filtering out some things that we're going to reabsorb, but a lot of things that we simply want to excrete. So we're filtering at the glomerular capillaries, and we're moving into Bowman's capsule. Now, we do have blood supply coming in, right? You can remember that it is the afferent arterioles that are feeding into the glomerular capillaries and the efferent arterioles that are moving out. The simple way that I remember that is simply A comes before E. Afferent arterioles are moving blood in. So filtration, we're really seeing soluble compounds move in here. We are not expecting to see any cells. So if you ever found blood in your urine, that would be a sign that something bad is going on, because we would not want red blood cells to be able to filter through the glomerular capillaries. We also would not expect to find our larger proteins there, right? That would not be good if protein was getting through the capillaries. So these soluble compounds, and we'll talk about some examples of those in a moment. Okay, so that's filtration. Afferent in, capillaries to filter through, ends up in Bowman's capsule. All right, well, after we have filtrate in the nephron, we still want an opportunity to basically give the body back some stuff and give an opportunity for the body to give the filtrate some stuff. So what is the process by which the body is going to take things from the nephron? What is that process? Something going from the filtrate back into the bloodstream. You got it. That is reabsorption. That is reabsorption. So examples of some things that are going to be reabsorbed: glucose, amino acids, and definitely our salts as well. Okay, so that's reabsorption. We also, like I said, want an opportunity for things in the bloodstream to get back into the nephron. You know, we sent some things into the nephron initially through filtration, but we still want an opportunity to do that. And the process by which we do that is called secretion. Now, finally, we want to get rid of all of this stuff in the nephron altogether, and that is the process we call excretion. So really, when you're thinking about what's being excreted, it is what has been filtered minus what has been reabsorbed plus what has been secreted. And then you have the things that are going to leave the body as urine. So what is the pathway by which urine leaves the body? What is that pathway? Let's see if you guys know your physiology here. We're going to excrete into the ureter, then to the bladder, then to the urethra. Very nice, Brandon. Brandon's got it down. Solid work there. So like I said, don't be too worried about this image on the left right now. We're going to go into it in detail, but the important thing when we go into the detail of different parts of the nephron is understanding these four main functions. Then we can talk about where each of these things occurs. All right, so let's take a look at this image that I think is a little easier to understand the different parts. So like we said before, filtration is going to occur from the glomerular capillaries into Bowman's capsule. So I'm going to use a green arrow to kind of show you these different parts. So here we have our afferent arteriole, and we're feeding in to the glomerular capillaries, right? So this is a bed of capillaries. Things are going to filter then into Bowman's capsule, which is this little C-shaped part of the nephron right here. So that is Bowman's capsule. That's where filtration occurs. Now, if we're talking about reabsorption and secretion, we are then comparing bloodstream to nephron. So this entire part here, this is where filtrate is moving along in this direction to leave the body. The bloodstream is going to secrete things into the nephron. And we already talked about reabsorption when we're going from the filtrate back to the blood. So let's talk a little bit more about the different parts of the nephron, and we'll continue to talk about their function. Okay, so Bowman's capsule is right here, the C-shaped portion. Next, we lead into the proximal convoluted tubule. What's the function of the proximal convoluted tubule? The figure may even help you here. What is this, the PCT? What does it do? It's the main site of the nephron for something specific. What is occurring here? You got it, Mo. This is where reabsorption occurs. At least most reabsorption is occurring here in the proximal convoluted tubule, though we do see some of our reabsorption occurring in the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct as well, but primarily looking at the PCT. So here we're seeing reabsorption of things like sodium, chlorine, water, amino acids, and glucose. We do see some secretion occurring here as well. So dump the hunk is a mnemonic you guys may have heard of before. Hunk being H-U-N-K for protons, urea, ammonia, and potassium. And dumping is like secreting. So we're dumping the hunk. So there's some secretion occurring here in the proximal convoluted tubule as well. We then move into the descending limb of the loop of Henle. What's happening in the descending limb of the loop of Henle? What goes on there? So we see a full loop, but the descending and the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, they do different things. So what happens here? And again, the picture is pretty helpful, right? We are seeing reabsorption of water. It's kind of hidden back here. So if we are reabsorbing water, we're going to find that as we move down the loop of Henle, we are going to see a more concentrated osmolarity, right? Because water's leaving, now we have more solute compared to our water amounts. Well then, as we move up the ascending limb, we are going to see reabsorption of solute. We have the thin ascending limb right here, and we have passive diffusion. Then we move to the thick ascending limb where we see active reabsorption of our salts. Now the reason it is thicker, if you think about it, well, if it's active, we have to have energy source. And to do that, we have to have mitochondria here. Then we get to the distal convoluted tubule. What happens in the distal convoluted tubule? Like we said before, we do see some reabsorption occurring here in the distal convoluted tubule, but we see a lot more of something else, and that something else is secretion, right? So we see a bunch more secretion occurring in the DCT, and like you guys are saying, we do see reabsorption of water and salt occurring here as well. We see reabsorption of water in a few places, right? Pretty much water is going to be reabsorbed everywhere except for the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. So if you look at it, water is reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule, in the descending limb, in the distal convoluted tubule, and in the collecting duct. So water loves to be reabsorbed back into the body. Finally, after the distal convoluted tubule, we are going to move into our collecting duct, and water is going to be reabsorbed as we move down our collecting duct, again concentrating our urine. So we want that to happen. We want as much water to come back in as possible. We want to concentrate that urine and get rid of those waste products. So that's kind of a run through of the nephron. Of course, there are things that you will have to look back at and make sure you know, okay, where did reabsorption occur again? Where did secretion occur again? But things like dump the hunk will help you remember which things are secreted. Okay, so now we've talked a little about the nephron. Let's talk more about this filtration process. This is one of, I think, the hardest things when it comes to the kidney, specifically the nephron. So what you're looking at here are glomerular capillaries and Bowman's capsule. So we're going to talk about a couple different types of pressure and what is actually driving fluid from the blood into the nephron. This is some challenging stuff. So let's define a couple of things. So we have PGC, which is the hydrostatic pressure of the glomerular capillaries. Yes, and Michele, you're exactly right. We're getting into Starling forces. So P is hydrostatic pressure. The sub-GC is glomerular capillary. So hydrostatic pressure is the pressure due to fluid running up against the walls of things. So hydrostatic pressure wants to push fluid out. That's what you should think of. Hydrostatic pressure pushes fluid out. Well, we're also going to have oncotic pressure. Oncotic pressure is the pressure due to all of the solute inside of the liquid. That pressure wants to suck liquid back in. Okay, so oncotic pressure is pulling liquid in, and hydrostatic pressure is pushing liquid out. So these two things are acting against each other. Now, to make things slightly more complicated, we don't only have the hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure of the glomerular capillary, we also have hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule, also known as Bowman's space, and the oncotic pressure of Bowman's space. Okay, so if we look at this diagram, we can see that the pressure, the hydrostatic pressure from the glomerular capillaries is going to push fluid out and into Bowman's capsule. The hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule is going to push liquid back in to the capillary. Oncotic pressure is going to do the opposite thing. So oncotic pressure, due to all the solute inside of the bloodstream, is going to pull liquid back into the capillary. Oncotic pressure of the solute in Bowman's capsule is going to pull the liquid back into Bowman's capsule. Okay, so if we're trying to decide which of these is winning, what do you think is one of our strongest forces at play here? What's going to win? This is what we're getting at with Starling forces, as Michaela mentioned. So we think about how we want fluid to move, that helps us a bunch. We would expect, just as you guys are saying, the hydrostatic pressure of the glomerular capillaries, we would expect that to be much, much larger than we would the hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule. And that's going to lead to a net movement of liquid going from the glomerular capillaries into Bowman's capsule, which is what we would expect to happen during filtration. Now, when we compare our oncotic pressures as well, we expect to find that the oncotic pressure of the glomerular capillaries is bigger than the oncotic pressure of Bowman's capsule, which would mean a flow out of the nephron. Okay, well, we have one that's saying flow into nephron, one saying flow out of nephron. Well, we can then figure out our entire net flow. Our net flow is from the blood into the nephron. And that's what we would expect, saying before that filtration goes from the bloodstream into the nephron. So what we can do then is start to think about consequences here, right? What's going to lead to a greater flow? What's going to lead to less flow? This is where we really start to think about the meaning of hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure. And I know this is tricky, but if you remember, hydrostatic pressure pushes out, oncotic pressure pulls in, you will be set. So now I want to look at our net hydro pressure, NFP, okay? So this is our net filtration pressure, is also what NFP is. So when we consider this, we have PGC minus PBS, so this is hydrostatic pressure of glomerular capillaries, subtracting off the hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule. But then we're going to subtract our oncotic pressures. Oncotic pressure of glomerular capillary minus Bowman's capsule. Because here what we're seeing is this represents our flow into the nephron, and this represents our flow out of the nephron. So we're subtracting off our flow out of the nephron to get our entire net filtration pressure. So tricky, but I think that if you break it down this way, you can keep track. So Tala, oncotic pressure is the pressure due to the solutes in a liquid. So all of the solute in the blood, for instance, it's going to want to pull water back in. So that is the pressure that's due to solutes that wants to suck, if you will, water back in. So it wants a net in back into itself. Whereas hydrostatic pressure, if you're thinking about just water moving through a hose, it's exerting pressure on the edges of the hose and ultimately wants to flow out of the hose. So it is the pressure due to the liquid itself. So they oppose each other. One wants flow out, one wants flow in. So you'll learn lots more detail about these things, but for the purposes of the MCAT, if you know hydro pushes out, oncotic pushes in, and you realize that you're looking at both of those for glomerular capillaries and Bowman's capsule, you will be in good shape. So next I want to look at are how we would apply. So if we look here, we're given some values. So we have a hydrostatic pressure of glomerular capillaries of 60. We have a hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule of 18, and we have an oncotic pressure of glomerular capillaries of 32. So of course, if we want to calculate our NFP, we're going to take 60 minus 32 minus 18. And a typical net filtration pressure is 10. But let's talk about how this might change if we had a couple of different scenarios. So we want to determine what's going to happen to the glomerular filtration rate under these circumstances. So take a moment to consider our first one, constricting the afferent arteriole. If we constrict our afferent arteriole, what would you expect regarding the amount of flow we have through the arteriole if we're constricting it? What would happen to our flow? Yeah, we would definitely have less flow. Okay, if we have less flow, we have less pressure. So if we have less pressure, or specifically hydrostatic pressure of the glomerular capillaries, our PGC, what would happen to our glomerular filtration rate? Well, it would also have to decrease, right? If we consider dropping 60 to a lower value, that's going to result in an overall decrease in NFP. So constricting our afferent arteriole would lead to a decrease. Awesome, nice job. Okay, we have a couple other scenarios to look at, so let's consider our next one. I'll give you a moment to think about it. Okay, so in this next one, we are talking about a constriction of our efferent arteriole, okay? So we're constricting right over here. So if we constrict this, but we still have fluid trying to move this way, what happens to the pressure over here? So we've made this smaller, but we're still trying to move fluid in this direction. What happens to our pressure over at this afferent arteriole? It's going to increase, absolutely. Okay, so if we have an increase in pressure at our afferent arteriole in our glomerular capillaries, then we are going to see that PGC, that hydrostatic pressure, is going to increase. So if we increase this above 60, then we're going to ultimately see an increase in glomerular filtration rate. Excellent. You guys are killing it. You are up for the challenge. All right, we have one last example to look at here. What if we had a kidney stone stuck in the ureter? I'll give you a moment to think about that. What do you think would happen here? If we had a kidney stone, where would that increase pressure? Brandon, you have got it. You've got it. We're going to see an increase in pressure in Bowman's capsule if we have a kidney stone, okay? So if we have an increase in pressure in Bowman's capsule, remember, where is this pressure pushing? If we have an increased hydrostatic pressure in Bowman's capsule, what direction is that pressure pushing? That's going back against fluid movement into Bowman's capsule, right? So it's opposing our normal direction. You could also think of this as increasing this value 18. So if we increase the value of 18, or if we oppose the movement of filtrate into Bowman's capsule, then of course we are going to see a decrease in our glomerular filtration rate. Nicely done, you guys. So we got it. If you are not quite sure, it's something you can certainly come back to and think about. I think the hardest thing really comes into understanding the difference in a hydrostatic and an oncotic pressure, and really thinking, okay, if we have something that's occurring downstream, what's going to happen before that, right? So like in this example, what does a kidney stone cause? where would we see a buildup of pressure? So kind of understanding and mapping out that flow of fluid is really helpful to answer these types of questions. But you guys did great. Next, I want to talk a little bit more about what comes into our filtrate. Okay, so cells and platelets. Remind me, is that a good thing? Should we expect that to be in our filtrate? Should we expect those to make it there? If you found some cells in filtrate, that would likely mean damage to your kidney. That would not be a good thing at all. Okay, well, ions and glucose. Both of those, we already talked about them being reabsorbed. So if they're reabsorbed, then that would definitely mean that those things are expected to make it into our filtrate. So both ions and glucose we expect to be filtered. What about albumin? What do we say about proteins? Is it a good thing for proteins to make it into the filtrate? This is one of those like our cells. Proteins and cells are no-no. We do not want those guys moving into our filtrate. All right, nice. We're seeing some review here. Some of this stuff is coming back, and you guys are doing great. Okay, so at this point, let's do now a quick review. Make sure we understand, since we're suddenly putting all of this together, how all of this relates. Okay, so we have our afferent arteriole. We're walking through the nephron again. Afferent arteriole, we have all of these solutes, including our albumin, our ions, our glucose, that are leading to this oncotic pressure that wants to pull liquid back in. But we have a stronger hydrostatic pressure that's going to push fluid into Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule has its own solutes. That's going to give it oncotic pressure, wanting to suck fluid in, which is the direction we want to go. So things are going to be filtered, specifically ions, glucose, not our cells, not our proteins, are going to move from Bowman's capsule into our proximal convoluted tubule. Here, we are going to see lots and lots of reabsorption, the primary site of reabsorption, and we see some secretion as well. Again, dump the hunk. Then we move into our loop of Henle. So loop of Henle, remember, has two parts. We first want to see an increase in solute concentration as we move down the loop of Henle. So we have to think, how am I going to lead to an increase in solute concentration? I can't directly just dump more solute in here if I'm only looking at reabsorption. So what would I need to do? I would need to reabsorb water. So that's what happens in the descending limb. I'm reabsorbing water, which ultimately concentrates that filtrate. Well, then I move up the ascending limb of loop of Henle, and here I want to dilute, right? And the way I'm diluting is not by adding water, because there's no aquaporin at the ascending limb. Now I am seeing the dumping of what we have in the filtrate. Now, if we're dumping what's in the filtrate, that is reabsorption, right? So here we are reabsorbing our solutes by both passive and active reabsorption. Finally, we're going to make it over into the distal convoluted tubule, which, speaking of, if we go back into our hormones, remember we talked about ADH and aldosterone, which of those two is primarily active in the distal convoluted tubule? See if you guys know it. Which of our two hormones is primarily active in our distal convoluted tubule? So we actually see that ADH mostly is active in the collecting duct. Aldosterone is mostly active at the distal convoluted tubule. So it's okay if you did not know that. It's one of those things that you might not have had that question before. So again, it's not just one or the other, but primarily we see aldosterone being active at the distal convoluted tubule. And then once we move down into the collecting duct, we are going to see ADH be more active. And that kind of makes sense if you think about what happens in the collecting duct. Remind me, what goes on here in the collecting duct as we move down? We see a lot of one particular thing. What do we see? As we move down the collecting duct, we want to make sure we're concentrating that urine, and we do that with reabsorption of water. And remember, ADH is going to be active by increasing the activity of those aquaporins, reabsorbing water. So sometimes you don't have to memorize. It may feel like, oh, now I have to memorize that aldosterone's active in the distal convoluted tubule, that ADH is active in the collecting duct. Well, you don't really. If you think about what you know happens in the collecting duct, then it makes sense that this is where ADH would be active, because ultimately, when we get to the bottom, and you may notice this, both at the bottom of the loop of Henle and the bottom of the collecting duct, we want to see our highest concentration. So to get a high concentration, we are going to see lots of water reabsorption. Okay, we're killing this stuff. All right, what I want to look at now is big picture review and simplify as much as possible. So reabsorption occurs everywhere except reabsorption is going to occur everywhere except where? Okay, so a lot of you guys mentioning the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. Do we have reabsorption there? We have reabsorption of something, just not of water, right? So we have reabsorption in both the ascending and the descending loop of Henle. Now, if I were to specify where do I see reabsorption of ion versus reabsorption of water, so the only place that I don't see reabsorption of the nephron, Vanessa, you've got it, Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule is where we see filtration coming across. So we don't need reabsorption there because we've directly filtered from the blood. So Whitney and Vanessa, nicely done. We do not need reabsorption in Bowman's capsule. We see reabsorption everywhere else. Now, if we wanted to say, where do I see reabsorption of water only? Where do I see reabsorption of water only? I know you guys have got this one. The descending limb of the loop of Henle, I have reabsorption of water only. And then in the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, I have reabsorption of ions only. Excellent. Very nice. So these questions are kind of getting to the point where you're not just memorizing what each thing does, but if you're having to think, okay, big picture, where do things happen? Where are things not happening? So really nicely done. We see aquaporins exist only in one part of the loop of Henle and not in the other part. So what I want to look at now is something that's a little trickier. Here we have a little more application and trying to piece together different parts of what we've discussed. So what we're going to look at now is predicting what graphs would look like. Okay, so bear with me as we take a look at this graph together. So if we look at our x-axis, we have plasma glucose concentration. If we look at our y-axis, we are looking at glucose filtered, reabsorbed, or excreted. Now what we're going to try and do is identify which of these lines are excretion, which of the lines are reabsorption, and which of the lines are filtration. So what I want you guys to think about for a moment, are we going to be able to reabsorb everything that is filtered into the nephron? It's the first thing to consider here. No, absolutely. We're not going to be able to reabsorb everything. Okay, so looking at these different lines, I want you to tell me which color of these lines would you expect to be our line for reabsorption? Which of these lines would be reabsorption? Okay, a lot of answers for blue, a lot of answers for red. So let's just think about this. If we answered the question, and the question was, do we have reabsorption forever of glucose? Are we going to reabsorb forever? And you guys said no to that question. So if we think, all right, I'm going to reabsorb to a point, but then I'm not going to be able to reabsorb anymore. Well, that should make us think here that I'm going to increase until I hit a level that I cannot increase anymore. And at that point, I'm going to stop reabsorption and I'm going to level off. So we should think red line for reabsorption because you keep going until you cannot reabsorb anymore, and then we see a plateau. We're essentially hitting this asymptote. So red line equals reabsorption. Nice. Okay, well, let's think about our other lines. So if we have a point where we're going to get rid of things, so things are filtered in, they're not being reabsorbed, at what point would something stay in the filtrate? Where would we see something stay in the filtrate? We filter in, we continue filtering in, we reabsorb, meaning it moves back into the bloodstream. But eventually, when we can't reabsorb anymore, what happens to the rest of that glucose? Yeah, Sarah, essentially we don't need it anymore. So if it's not being reabsorbed, where does it go? If it does not get reabsorbed, where does it go? It's going to be excreted. You got it. So if we think about these lines and we say, okay, we're going to reabsorb to a certain point. At that point, we can't reabsorb anymore. That is where we see excretion pick up, right? So beyond this, about 225 milligrams per milliliter, we're going to see the rest of that concentration has to be excreted. So this like lime green, yellowy looking line, we'll call it green. This green line has to be our excreted plasma glucose. It's got to go out of the body. You guys got it. Nice. Now, if we think about this blue line that continues constantly all the way up, what would that have to be then? The thing that's consistent, that it's going to keep going through. And Katie, I agree. It is fitting that the excretion line is like this yellowy greenish. And Shubra, you've got it. This blue line has got to be filtration, because if you think about filtration, filtration is going to continue, right? We expect for filtration to filter that entire glucose load out. So that's going to be our consistent. It is not going to change slope. We're going to reabsorb as much as we can, then it's going to level off. And once it's level off, the rest has to be excreted. So I know this kind of graph is a little bit tricky. It's probably something we're not super familiar with looking at, but this is the kind of critical thinking that if you can handle this, then you're going to be golden for testing. So if you're a little unsure, just make sure you're considering what counteracts what, right? So reabsorption means it's not going to be excreted. So if it's not reabsorbed, then it has to be excreted. So those two would expect to pick up after the other one drops off. Okay, we have one more topic to talk about today, and it's one of those other tough topics, but I really think this is going to help clarify a ton for you guys. So what do you think about when you think about countercurrent multiplier system? Generally, the response to that has been, I have no idea what that is. That's what most of my students tell me when we start talking about countercurrent multiplier. It's this very confusing, like I know it happens, but I don't really conceptually understand. So if that's you, then I'm hoping we're going to help you with this next illustration. Yeah, and a lot of you guys, ew, no clue. I can tell you that that's generally the consensus when I ask that question. Just hang tight. This is like the best illustration ever. Okay, so when we're considering the different parts of the nephron, we would say that in these horizontal segments, we're focused on identity of solutes. In the vertical segments, we're focused on volume and concentration. We mentioned that before. When we were talking about the loop of Henle and the collecting duct, that vertical portion, we said as we move down these, we are increasing concentration, right? So as we get to the bottom, we expect to see our high concentration. So we got to figure out what's driving that. What's driving this gradient? That's kind of the big thing we're trying to figure out here. All right, so moving from afferent arterial, leaving efferent arterial. Well, we have to consider the movement of blood. So what motion does the blood have relative to the nephron? Is it moving in the same direction? Is it moving in the opposite direction? Specifically, blood through the vasa recta. So vasa recta is going to mimic our loop of Henle, except we are not going to see that blood is moving the same direction. It's anti-parallel. Nice, Brandon. It's moving backwards. So what we see is that as we move down the loop of Henle, we could say, like moving our fluid to the right, essentially, if we look across the screen. Well, if we're looking at the vasa recta, it's going to be moving the opposite way. Now, when we had this water reabsorbed from the descending limb of the loop of Henle, where is that water going again? Where does that end up? This is back to like the very beginning now. When something's reabsorbed from the nephron, where does it go? Where does it go? Moves through the interstitium and back into the blood. You got it. So we should consider that if we have anti-parallel flow, that one of these is directly impacting the other. So that water is going into the vasa recta. When we have the ascending limb and we have solute moving out, that is also moving into the vasa recta. As we move down the collecting duct, we're reabsorbing water. Again, that's moving to the same place. So when we consider just the nephron, it doesn't really paint a picture. It can also be confusing. Okay, why do we see this concentration gradient? Why do we see that water is reabsorbed as we move down the loop of Henle? I'm about to show you exactly why that is. So as we map our vasa recta, as we map our gradient here, the picture becomes a lot clearer. So the vasa recta is moving directly in the opposite direction. So let's consider as we move from one side of loop of Henle and back around the vasa recta. So get ready for this. Sodium is going to move out of the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. It's then going to flow around with the vasa recta, and when we see sodium hitting this side of the vasa recta, it's pulling water out of the descending limb. Okay, so watch this illustration again. It is the coolest illustration. Sodium moving out of the ascending limb. It travels around the vasa recta and now is pulling water out of the descending limb. It's like one of these illustrations you have to watch a few times, but it clarifies everything regarding concentration. So I'm going to go a little slower with my arrow. So we know solute is being reabsorbed in the ascending limb. So solute moves into the vasa recta. Well, we know vasa recta has anti-parallel flow, so it's going to move right along. Well, once we get over here, if we have solute, what's going to come next? Well, of course, our water, right? Water follows solute. So once we get over into this side of the vasa recta, we're now pulling water from the descending limb. Let me know if that makes sense. This is like so cool how this works. I think it really clarifies why do we see the things we do in the loop of Henle. So I'll play it for you again. Solute moves out and it sucks water into the blood. Solute moves out of the nephron and it sucks water back in. So nice, Carol, if you do remember this, it is kind of a tricky concept, but what you should know about the countercurrent multiplier system is it's setting the gradient. It is why the loop of Henle concentrates at the bottom, and it allows for the reabsorption of water in that descending limb. Bobby, I'm super glad. I'm going to play it one more time just because it's like the greatest illustration ever. So here we go. Last time. Solute moves out of the ascending limb, moves around the vasa recta, pulls water from the descending limb back into the blood. Yeah, it's so good. It's the best animation I've ever seen in terms of explaining countercurrent multiplier system. And you guys made it through the hardest part. We talked about hydrostatic and oncotic pressure. We talked about all the different parts of the nephron, and we finished by understanding the countercurrent multiplier system. You guys may not feel 100% confident, but if you can learn all of this stuff, you can consider yourselves MCAT experts when it comes to the kidney. So great job. It was super fun to work through this with you guys. I hope that you'll come back on our other nights. Come visit us. I will now hand it back over to Allie. She has lots of good stuff to share with you guys to finish up tonight. So again, thanks for your attention. Thanks for your participation, and we hope to see you again soon.
Hey, hi. How did it go? How did you love it? Isn't she awesome? Can we just tell her how amazing she is? I feel like people should know. People should be told. I tell you what, like I know definitely because I saw a comment come in, like I know that there are times in a content lesson where we're going to see stuff that we do know and stuff that we don't know, and you have to kind of find your way through it. So I'm just so excited. And you know, the thing too is when you study for the MCAT, and we're going to put that email poll back up too so that you can get your homework and you can get review and handouts from this lesson after class. What was I going to say? What was I talking about? I totally lost track of my So I was saying, oh goodness, content review. Oh yeah. That when it comes to studying for the MCAT content, you have to know what is being tested because it really is a mile wide, but it's only an inch deep. And then you need to know exactly what's tested on the MCAT and exactly how it's tested too, so that you don't end up studying the wrong things and so that you can understand things in a way that relates to the questions that you will be asked, which are largely application based. So I'm so glad. Can you tell me one thing or even more? Tell me something, a fact or a strategy or something that you learned today that you can start employing for more MCAT points. I'd love to hear your takeaways, because I swear every time we teach a lesson, students have different takeaways, different things that stuck out to them that they needed, that hit the spot, hit the MCAT spot. Oh, you're so welcome, Kayla, and more to come too. We still have about 20 minutes left of the lesson. So we're going to talk to you about study planning in addition to the MCAT, because there's more that we need to be ready, because preparing for this test is not like preparing for anything else. Oh, yes, countercurrent multiplier concept. Yes, 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 Yvonne, I love it. I love it. Well, you know, Teacher Kristen, I don't think Teacher Kristen is back tomorrow night. We'll have a new teacher tomorrow. And throughout the week, we're going to bring some of the very best teachers from Kaplan. So we're really super excited about that. Is everyone signed up for the lesson /events? That is the link to sign up. Yes, just think, don't freak out. For real, Vanessa. And I will tell you what, there's always something that you can do. Like if you look at the question and you blank, guess what? Look at the answer choices. The answer choices will tell you what it is specifically that they're interested in. You know, they will all have a pattern. So definitely. Kim, you know, I tell you what, in undergrad, they want you to know so much about so much and have such a deep knowledge. But we're not doing that here. Here we do very thin amount of knowledge, because again, the MCAT is not a science test. It is an application test. It's a critical reasoning test, and it uses science to kind of like play their game. I was thinking of that movie. You seen that movie Saw? He wants to play a game with you. It's like the MCAT. The MCAT wants to play a game with you, and you have to be able to speak science. So you have to know enough science to speak the language of playing the game. But yeah. Oh yes, you're gonna need to know those differences, Davina. Very good. Very good. So I want to talk about the types of resources that I'm sure you have or are going to get along your way, and what they're best to be used for. I feel like, and you'll see this on the left side, and this is, I put it in terms of the Kaplan MCAT course, but you, wherever, whatever you're using. Yes, thank you, Kim. I love that one. That's one of my favorites, right? A mile wide and an inch deep. So the 4 things that I think that you need to be totally ready for your MCAT are: 1, content review. Like you have to be able to play their game, which means you have to know the science. Today's lesson was a content lesson. Later in the week, we're having our boot camp, which is a strategy session, which is where you're going to learn how to apply content to highly missed MCAT questions, being strategic and really cutting that time in half, being able to focus on the simpler science content question that's actually being tested without being pulled into the weeds, as Kim is saying, and getting stuck there. So that lesson will be a lot more strategic. So we're going to have content lessons up to the strategy lessons. And also the lesson that we do after our practice test is largely a strategy lesson as well. So I think also content review and test strategy, those become probably the top 2 things that you need. Then, of course, stress management. Is anybody feeling stressed already? Anybody brave enough to admit? I felt very stressed throughout all my test prep. You know, even though I knew it worked, and oh, I'm so glad to hear it, Carol. Yeah, I love the boot camp. I love the boot camp, and I know Teacher Aishwarya has a special place in her heart for the boot camp as well. But yes, so much stress, right? So that's a big piece of it too, and that is something that you actually need to pay attention to, because it really can get in the way of your study, and it can cause you to make bad decisions that just compound the issue. Like sometimes we want to put. I've seen students tell me that their plan is to do 15 prep hours in a day, 7 days a week, because they're so stressed out about not being ready on time or not getting ready or not. But that is a terrible plan, because then you're going to be more stressed out and you're going to be more tired and your brain is going to be more overwhelmed and you're going to retain less and you're going to learn slower and you're going to be more at risk for burnout and fatigue. So really paying attention to stress management is really important. Yeah, exactly, Erica. It's like a whole roller coaster every 10 minutes, for real. And then another thing that you need, which is just the overall, is good study planning. You have to have a plan. I'm sure you guys have found that there are a million billion MCAT resources. There's a million billion potential topics. There's not really. There's only certain things that they test, but it can seem like a million billion. And it can be very easy to lose track of yourself in all of the resources that you have, all of the books, all of the chapters, all of the practice tests, and you might end up, oh, well, I'm spending so many hours a week, but I'm not getting so many points. Has that happened to anyone yet, where you have spent a good amount of hours, but you're not getting as many points out of those hours as you might expect? I will tell you that happened to me. That's why I actually sought help with it. But I can tell you, because now I am the help with it, that being a little bit more strategic in your planning of your study can really, really help you, because there's no magic number. Like, there's a certain amount of average numbers of hours that are spent, but they have to be quality hours of prep, and they have to be the right things, because you don't want to study so much, but then not get the reward for it. So you have to make sure that you are understanding exactly why you're doing the things that you're doing, the order that you're doing them in, and how that is going to overall help you to reach your goals in your time frame. Because you don't want to spend all these hours and not get your payoff, which is points and being ready in your time frame. So, I'm going to start with this. In studying on your own, studying on your own is really, really important. You have to do some things on your own. Absolutely. Is it the only way you should be studying? No, I don't think so. I think that, just much like being an undergrad, you can have all the books in the world, but being able to put it together and understand it in a comprehensive whole is very difficult without a teacher. And I think you may have seen from Teacher Kristen just now, Kim, I love, yeah, Bobby, I love those books as well. And I tell you what, our Kaplan 7 series books are the most popular MCAT books for a reason. They're like so good, but they only do content. So you're going to have to augment that with something. But I think that's really important. That's really what I'm talking about here too, is science content instruction. These are things that you can and should do on your own. You should do concept checks as you go. You should do discrete practice on individual questions. So I don't want you to just do practice quizzes or full-length practice tests. I want you to really target something. Like today you learned about the kidney. So I would love for you to, before tomorrow's lesson, do a lot of practice items, MCAT style practice items that are testing information on the kidney with your notes out, slow and steady, reading the explanation each time, so that the next time you do take a practice test, you will have really worked on the kidney and you have reason to believe that you're going to have a higher score because you're so much better at kidney questions now. One of the things that I really like is a worked out example. Sometimes students just want to answer questions, just want to see if you're going to be able to get to answers. And that's it. Oh, I got it wrong. I'll try another one. Oh, I got it wrong. I got another one. Oh, I got it right. That's all I can do with it. There's more, right? I want you to see why each wrong answer is wrong. I want you to see why each wrong answer was designed, because it's not always going to happen. Does anybody ever have the, I call it the ding effect. The ding effect is when you look at a question and you just get it. You just get the answer and you're like, ding, and you get it right. Anybody? Like, I feel like this happens at least a couple questions for everyone, right? Up to a lot of questions. You just get it because it's instinctual and you understand that topic a little bit better. But then there are other times when there's no ding and the light bulb doesn't come on and you're just like, holy crud. For me, there were more no light bulb moments. I don't know where you guys are at with that, but the thing that can help you to fix the no light bulb moment is to understand a step-by-step way. Okay, fine, no ding. How can I use these answer choices to inform what I should be thinking about? How can I break apart this question in pieces? How can I do educated guesses? How can I learn to look for what's wrong in wrong answers and see flaws? Because maybe I don't see what's right, but maybe I can see the flaw they're trying to catch me with on this one. Because the MCAT uses the same type of wrong answers over and over and over again. And so understanding like, oh, okay, this type of word is usually a wrong answer. Let me check against what I know, against the question about, against the passage that I've been provided. So having something for those no ding moments becomes critical because your instinct is not enough. So I don't want you to always just be like answering questions. Did I get it right? No, I'll do the next one. Did I get it right? No, I'll do the next one. Did I get it right? Yes, awesome. I'll do the next one. I want you to also look at why are the wrong answers wrong, right? And especially if you fall into a trap of a wrong answer, and we're going to talk later about this, about data tracking in your prep. Why did you fall into that trap? What is that trap that you're consistently falling into so that you can look out for it next time? Because we're not always going to ding, but we can always get right answers. And so that is like a really important piece, I believe. You know, the way that we do this content review here with Kaplan is our MCAT review books. Shout out if you have our MCAT 7 series review books. They're the most popular MCAT books. Most students, like I think like 75% of all students who are prepping for the MCAT will use Kaplan 7 series MCAT review books. So we're super, super proud of them. And a lot of teachers in this room helped to create those books. So you can give them a shout out as well if you're using those books. And also we have an email address for anyone who has those books so that you can write into a teacher support team at any time. And I think that not everybody knows that. So if you have those books and you don't know, you do have a teacher team that you can email to ask questions. I mean, it's not, you know, as direct as being able to talk to me right now, but you have that. So make sure. I knew it. Look at that. Didn't I tell you 75% of all MCAT preppers are going to use those books at some point in their prep? I mean, they're just so popular. They're so great. We're so proud of them. So that's a study on your own, a great resource. Another thing that you should focus on too is the yield of the stuff that you're studying, right? So if a concept is really difficult, that doesn't mean that it is the thing you should spend the most hours on, unless it's high yield, unless there's a lot of points on the table, right? If something is only going to be tested 1 or 2 times, and it's going to take you, so I know, Sarah, not a lot of people know that. That's why I always want to tell you, if you need that, go ahead and ask your tutor, and we'll get them that. We'll get you that email address. But yeah, you want to focus on the yield, because if a topic is only going to be questioned 1 or 2 times, I mean, we want every point, and eventually that is a thing that we're going to want to study, but we don't want to prioritize the hours and hours and hours and hours it may take us if something is that hard for us first. Does that make sense? Like sometimes I see students like, oh, this is the hardest thing on the test, so I need to spend all these hours very early in my prep trying to figure that out and understand that and know that. And it's like, yeah, if you've learned everything else and those are your last couple 2 points on the test to scoop up, then yeah, you should start putting those hours in. But you know what? If you have other stuff that's going to be tested 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, then those are the things that you should be prioritizing and putting your hours and hours of prep into. So make sure that you understand the yield as well. One of the things that we use too is science review videos. So make sure too that you also are thinking about how you study. So as much as we all love books and we're used to them, is that everyone's like best way to study for them, for your learning style? What is your learning style? I'm an oral learner. Like when I took the little test, it was like all the way that way because I have to talk to someone. I have to have a conversation with you. Like I can read all day long and it's going to be the moment that I get 2 minutes to pick your brain that I'm just going to get it because I have to listen to you and talk to you. And that's just the way that I learn. So for me, I can't just read and read and read and read and then be ready for something. I can't do that. And some people are visual and some people really need to get their hands on stuff. So if you can put models together, that's going to work really well for you. One of the things that we do here at Kaplan is we provide a booklet that is the same way that your booklet, the wet erase booklet with the marker that you're going to use on test day, we provide that to all of our students so that our students can put their hands on it for those tactile learners who really need to understand how even that is going to feel on testing. Oh yeah, rewriting is a great way for retention. Don't forget we're doing a whole lesson on retention in Plus Coaching this week too. Absolutely. Yes, audio. So if you are finding, hey, this stuff is great in these books or whatever you're reading, but you're like, but I'm not getting as many points as I wanted to, then maybe it's because you should seek out some videos too, because that's how you learn. Or you should come to our free events and ask us some questions. Or you should talk to your teacher or your tutor, whatever it has, so that you can also address your learning style. Do not think that your reason that you're not moving as fast in your points is because you are somehow unable or you are somehow lacking. It's like, you know, if you're not using the right resources for you or doing something in a way that works for you, it doesn't matter how great that resource is, it's not enough for you. And, you know, you can just fix it by thinking about how do I learn and what works well for me. Carol, that's awesome. I do that too. That's because you're an oral and an oral learner. So being able to talk and listen really helps you to learn. I do the same thing. And in fact, I will teach things which is probably how I ended up being a teacher. But I would teach things to my husband or my parents or my friends, whoever would let me, so that I could get the opportunity to say out loud, because being able to say out loud the steps of something just helps me to understand it better. So that was one of the things I did. That's totally free. That's a great study strategy if you're one of those students. It is, yeah, Naga, absolutely. It is one of those things, especially if they can ask you questions. So if it's like a person who really doesn't get it, it was great with my husband because he didn't understand anything. And he would ask me these questions. And I'd be like, is that a real question? But I would, explain it to him. So that is really, really helpful. And it's something that you can do. Like I'm really good with flashcards, but when I had to do the flashcards alone, I found out that it wasn't working. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time, like, why are my flashcards not helping me like they usually do? It's because I was doing them alone, because it was never the flashcard. It was always the reading of it and hearing the response from the flashcard. So just focusing on how you learn can really help you to speed up your prep, right? Live resources can be really important for those students who are in the part of their study where they're focusing on strategy. Learning strategy is a lot quicker when you can just see someone do it. So pay attention to strategy in our boot camp. Pay attention to strategy in our post-practice test lesson. Post-practice test, we show a lot about the patterns of the MCAT and how to use those patterns to your benefit. Huge. It's actually my favorite MCAT lesson. I'm not teaching it this week. I wish I were, but you can find me sometimes. So watch out for that on CAT TV. Guided practice, I think, is really important to get your questions answered. Make sure that if you have questions, you ask them. If all you have is a book, then ask them via the email address, right? If you are coming to our free events and classes, then ask your teachers. Pay attention to the private chat. Ask privately questions. Talk to your tutor, ask your teacher on the screen. Make sure that you do it. Sometimes we have this thing. Have you guys ever done this where you're like, I don't get it, but I'll ask later. Oh, I'll see if I get it when I get home. After class, I'll just read the chapters and I'll see if I can get it then. And you just kind of like put it off because I don't know, sometimes people don't want to interrupt the lesson. Sometimes people get very focused on like trying to see if they can do it themselves first. But not only does retention increase significantly by asking questions as soon as possible, but topics build on each other in lessons, in books, in classes, in tutoring. Everything builds on each other. So if you decide, oh, I'll wait to figure that out. I'll study more when I get home. Like I'll do extra on that later, and maybe I'll get it then. Then guess what? The next topic that they're talking about in class, you just a little bit behind other folks. And then the next one, a little bit more. And sometimes it can snowball until you reach a point in your studies where you think, well, gosh, I guess I just don't get it. I guess there's just something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not as capable as I thought I was. But that's not what it is. What it is that you've got to talk and ask the questions. I totally agree, Carol. That happens to me all the time, despite the fact that you see me here talking in front of a lot of people. I'm actually alone in this room, so it makes it a lot easier. But if you come to our events or you come to our classes, whatever, you can totally ask privately via email. And this week, you guys have a totally free coach and teaching team. And we're going to pin that email to the top in the yellow box. It's consultateacher@kaplan.com. And you can work with me and my team free all week long. And that's totally private. You can ask any questions that you want, but ask them early and ask them often, because at the end of the day, it's you that matters. It's your MCAT point. It's your next MCAT point. It's your getting into medical school that matters, not any other student, just yours. Yes, you specifically. You, that is all of you. It is your right to ask of your teachers that they help you to reach the finish line. And it also is something we love to do. So you just ask and get it answered as soon as possible, because then your retention is going to increase, your ability to move forward is going to increase, and your time to prep is going to decrease significantly. So very important to get those questions answered, especially when it comes to strategy. So for us, obviously, we do lessons for that. We do live sessions, and we do on demand as well with a teacher support guided system the whole time. When it comes also to test strategy, I think teachers are the best. I think that learning strategy on your own can be really difficult because we have not been taught test taking skills. Right? We have not been taught test taking skills. Most people, especially American students, have terrible test taking skills. Because what is the biggest insult you can tell a teacher? Well, not here, but in other places. You only teach to the test. You only prepare them for the test. You're not a real teacher. You're just teaching for that test. You know, all of the teachers have heard this forever because of the way that we do standardized testing all throughout grade school and high school, whatever. So no teacher, except here at Kaplan, wants to teach for the test. And so they don't teach test taking skills. They don't teach the strategy. But it becomes really important because you're not always going to have that ding moment, especially in a strategic test that is application based. Sometimes you need to know, how do I see the clues that the test maker left? How do I see the patterns? How do I utilize a step-by-step method that is methodical, for lack of a better word, in order to still get those points? And so that is what these lessons are going to be really good for, especially the boot camp. Make sure you are signed up for the boot camp this week. You know, teachers help with all of the things: content review, test strategy, stress management, study planning. I want to hear those questions from you, and I'm going to have you emailing me all week long, I hope. Make sure you take advantage of that. Teacher Ashwarya is going to pin that email in the yellow box. It's consultateacher@kaplan.com. And if you put your email in either of the polls that I put up, I will be emailing you out tomorrow with your homework for the next class and with takeaways from this class and with handouts that you can use. And you can write me back at that email address with any questions, whatever you're working on, whatever experience, however, you know, you've stalled in your studying, your points aren't increasing as much as you want. Something happened on the last practices, whatever it is, let us know. The thing that we do for our students, of course, is that we make sure that they all get the MCAT channel, which you experienced the MCAT channel today. So that is, it's over 60, it's actually over 100 hours now of just all kinds of lessons at every different level on every different topic. So you know what, if you're like expert on a kidney and you've never missed an MCAT kidney question ever, I wouldn't put you in a kidney class. Like, we put you in a totally different class. So stay tuned all week and make sure that you are signed up for any of the lessons this week that correspond with something that you are still working on. Practice is key, but it has to be good practice, right? It does not do you any good to practice something if you're doing it wrong. Does that make sense? Like, I used to play basketball, so I always think back to that. But like, if I'm shooting bricks, I can shoot bricks all day long, but my bad form is not going to change. I'm not going to get better, right? I might kind of accidentally pick up that I should try something different, but it's so much slower. So you want to always make sure that you learn something new, that you do discrete practice, and then you apply that in a real like game day kind of scenario. So I don't want to do a scrimmage until my coaches told me, like, what is the form and how do I shoot from here and what is it going to look like and how I'm going to stand. And I've done that practice a lot. But that said, you do need to simulate test day, testing, building endurance. One of the ways that you can build endurance is just with the length of your study prep. Don't start off with sessions of study that are hours and hours long. That can be very, very difficult to do, but build up to it. You know, the Kaplan MCAT classes are all 3 hours long, and we do that in order to help you to build that endurance for testing. So you want to do it. Absolutely, Kim. That is so true. That is so true. You really are withdrawing from the learning process, and really think about all the pedagogy that you have maybe experienced or even used. You know, when you get to med school, you will be doing some teaching a little bit and as you go. And especially if any of you going for the MD, PhD programs, because you will be doing a lot of teaching as you go. So really think about what works for you and for any students that you've had, if you've done any tutoring in the past, and try and really employ that now. So make sure that you do simulate test day and you do take full-length practice tests. You know, here at Kaplan, we include every single thing that AMC has ever released for our students, all of the practice tests, all of the question packs, data tracking on all of your scores for that, as well as our own full-length tests. But make sure you get access to full-length tests and that you are taking them, but don't make them the only thing that you're doing. I do not have my tutoring or coaching students do full-length practice tests until they have done enough in between that we expect a score increase. because I don't want you testing. I want you learning, testing. Learning, testing. So we do discrete practice on, like, we learn about the kidney, then we do a lot of kidney practice questions. And then we learn about acids and bases. We do a lot of acids and bases practice questions. And we learn about something else. What are we doing this week? Mulgin. And then we take a bunch of mulgin questions. And then we're like, you know what? I got pretty good at kidney and mulgin and acids and bases. I think I'm ready for an MCAT practice test. So that's what I like to see you guys do too. You should be doing focus practice at different links and structures and difficulty level. For us, we use a whole Q bank, so it's adaptive by students. And just make sure that you have a lot of practice questions and that you start off easy. Sometimes students think, oh, if I could do the hardest questions, I could do the easiest. Well, that's not actually true. That's not actually true. Like, you could be really good at calculus, but if you haven't touched algebra in a hot minute and then you do it, you can make careless errors. You could have forgotten something because you just don't see it that often. So make sure that you start off with easy. If you can knock it out, fine, move it up the difficulty level, but don't just assume working backwards. And also, you should drill on key terms. So use flashcards or flashcard apps. We have a flashcard app that you can get in any app store. But yeah, make sure that you are learning the terms and the definitions, because the MCAT will employ some terms and you could miss questions, not because you don't understand that science content or even the strategy, and it's not that you don't think critically or you can't apply it. It's just because there is some terminology that is different than what you've used before. You haven't looked at it in a while and you need to know it. So make sure that you're doing that as well. So these are my big takeaways on the things that are best to study on your own, the things that are best to learn live, the way that you should practice, and some really good things for quick hits, which is flashcards. I will always love flashcards. Like, be still my heart, flashcards. Tomorrow's plus coaching lesson is going to be on building your MCAT study calendar. So how to fit all those MCAT prep hours into your calendar with all the other things you're doing. Like, I'm sure some of you are like shadowing and have classes and have volunteer hours and have work, and some of you have families. Anybody? Just me? No? So we want to see how can we do that realistically without building a schedule that's going to cause burnout, without building a schedule we can't possibly keep to, that's not realistic, without building a schedule that will not lead to points, right? Like, maybe we're bulking up way too much on only one type of study. We're not going to do that. We're going to figure out how to do it the other way. Make sure that your email is in my poll, because it will open up to you the world of free coaching from Kaplan all week long via email. Also going to get your homework, which is a primer for the next lesson. You're also going to get event handouts from this lesson and relating to the MCAT just generally that should be very, very helpful to you. And all of that is free as part of the free week of MCAT. I hope you're having fun. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I hope that you are enrolled in all of this week's lessons, or as many as you can get to. I really hope that you take us up on our offer for free coaching via email. I know it's not as great as doing it in person, but gives us the opportunity to do what we love to do, which is to help you reach your finish line. That's legitimately my life's work, and I look forward to working with you all this week. I can't wait to see you tomorrow and every day this week. Bye-bye.